Lately, I've been interested in exploring a Varlamore locked Ironman account. Normally, I play a max main. I've been max since 2021, and since then, I've done mostly just pet hunting. So I haven't really interacted with this island all that much besides the Coliseum to get my quiver and the Hunter Guild to try to go for Quetzin. A lot of the areas I've never been to, never been to Alderaan, never done Huey. That came out after I got insanely burnt on the game because bed hunting is really a slog. But I think playing an account that can't leave this island and has to get all the resources itself would be a really cool way for me to explore this island fairly blind. I think a few people have done this already. There's a Discord, the Ironman Snowflake Discord, where a few people have attempted this with Ironmans and Ultimate Ironman. Mika RS has a pretty good series on this. I like his series, but it's been a while since he's uploaded. He might be waiting until part three, like I am. I think it makes sense to not start this account until part three comes out because I've done a lot of research already, but there's so much we don't know about what's going to be here. There's the fletching activity, the new delve boss that's going to come out, a pretty end game boss with a couple of interesting rewards. There's a gemstone crab, which that's probably the thing I'm most interested in. Fletching activity, the new Slayer dungeon. So the research that I've done so far has been pretty comprehensive for part one and part two, but there's a lot of stuff that may come out in part three that'll change all that. So when I said I'd done some research, I've done a good amount of research. I went through, looked at all the areas, tried to figure out, what skills can I train pretty easily, what skills are really hard to train, and which ones are going to be a problem. Tried to figure out where I can get good resources from, looked at drop tables. So I've come to the conclusion that all the skills can be reasonably trained just on Varlamore, um, but there are some exceptions that I'm going to have to make with this account. The ones that are obvious are Rune Mysteries, so I can get Rune Crafting XP, and Druidic Rituals, so I can get Herbivore XP. There's a couple other ones too that have to do with quest requirements and skill training issues. The other exception would be I'm allowing myself to buy a player-owned house before getting on the island. That is sort of the only way to train construction reasonably would be to teleport to the player-owned house once I get the magic level and then train within there. But some other exceptions are going to be a little egregious depending on the difficulty of the count. So let's just get into that right now. So there's 5 skills that are going to be really difficult, if not impossible, to train just on Varlamore. Those are Hunter, Construction, Rune Crafting, Agility, kind of, and the big one, Slayer. I guess starting out with the Rune Crafting, the main problem is there is no real rune crafting method on Varlamore at all. There actually is a way to get rune crafting XP without, training rune crafting. The sulfur naguas in the Perilous Moons dungeon drop this sulfurous essence, which you can trade in to an NPC to get 50 runecraft XP per essence you trade in. So there is a way to train runecrafting, but it's locked behind a quest that has 20 runecrafting as a requirement. So that you're kind of stuck there. You have to make either the exception that you're going to train to 20 runecrafting before you jump onto this island, or you will have to lamp it, which is kind of painful, but 20 room crafting, that's not terrible if you're lamping just that. But then there's some other skills that are a problem, like construction. Problem number one with construction is there's no way to get a player-owned house currently on Varlamore. Maybe they will add a POH over here with an estate agent where you can buy a house. Maybe there'll even be a saw spawn over here. Jagex, please. But so the exception would be for construction that you allow yourself to buy a player-owned house before you get on the island, and possible another one you can make is you allow yourself a saw so that you can start training construction immediately as soon as you get the magic level to teleport to your house. There is another exception you can make, and I'll talk about that when I'll get to Hunter, which I guess we'll just do that right now. Hunter is a problem because there aren't any hunter creatures that you can catch on Varlamore that require only level 1. The closest thing that I could find there are some copper longtails over here on Alderan, which you can catch at level 9, but there's also no bird snare spawn or a way to get a bird snare other than buying one from the Hunters Guild, which requires 46, I think, Hunter to even enter and interact with any of the stuff. So you're kind of locked out there. The exceptions to that would be either you allow yourself to train up to 17 Hunter before jumping on the island. That allows you to enter Puro Puro through one of these wheat fields here. Then you can catch baby implings at level 17, and then you're off to the races. You can just catch implings all the way to 46. Um, or you could just say, okay, I'm going to lamp hunter to 17. That's really painful, especially on top of rune crafting if you're lamping that too. Or you could do a minor exception and allow yourself to bring a bird snare on the island and then lamp to 9, but that's a little bit weird. Um, the other exception, which is I've seen people do, and it's really, really tedious, but it kind of makes sense, is you allow yourself to take the forestry kit onto Varlamore. The forestry kit is important because it allows you to train both hunter and construction through the forestry events. Uh, the beehive event, you get construction XP for building these beehives. I mean, I think it's like one construction XP. Yeah, I don't. The wiki doesn't really say it, but I know you get like 1 to a half or something construction XP per action you do at the beehive event, which is not great. I mean, it's a kind of active way to train construction, so it's better than lamping marginally. Same thing with Hunter, the poacher event. You get a tiny, tiny bit of Hunter XP per action in the poacher event. So you can, kind of actively train these skills through forestry if you allow yourself that exception. One other wrinkle with Hunter before we move on to the next skill. The only way to use box traps, which are a requirement for the quest at First Light, which is where you unlock Master Hunter Rumors, is the Eagle's Peak quest. You actually need that quest before you even start at First Light, and you can't do that quest until you get 27 Hunter. So you may have to make an exception to, once you get to 27 Hunter, leave Varlamore, do Eagle's Peak, come back. Or you could just say, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to not do at First Light. I'm not going to do Master Hunter Rumors, and lock yourself out of that content. Another problem skill is agility. I scour this list of agility shortcuts that give you XP to see if there was something on Varlamore. That would be like best case scenario would be if there was like a fence you could squeeze through or a gap somewhere that required 1 agility but gave you a little bit of experience. Then you could train agility entirely on Varlamore without leaving, without making any exceptions. I mean, it would be slow, but doable. But there's not really. So the only option for agility training is a little bit weird. One option would be if you're able to do the quest at First Light, by allowing yourself to do Eagle's Peak, then during that quest, you're given a toy mouse. You can use this toy mouse, dropping it, picking it back up, gets you 3 agility XP. So extremely slow, but you can train agility on Varlamore without leaving if you allow yourself the exception of Eagle's Peak, so you can do that quest. Actually, scratch all that. Scratch all of that. All you need is a crafting table 4, and then you can make your own toy mouse. So you do not need Eagle's Peak to train agility. You can just make your own toy mouse at your crafting table as long as you're able to train construction up to 42. So I forgot to mention this earlier, but you do actually get a saw during the Perilous Moons quest. So you don't necessarily need to bring a saw to Varlamore when you first set foot on there. If somehow you're able to train up your construction through either lamping or forestry to 10 to be able to do this quest, then post quest you will have a saw and you can train construction normally. The big problem skill for a Varlamore locked account is Slayer. 48 Slayer is a requirement to do the quest that gives you access to Perilous Moons, which is one of the bigger, more exciting pieces of content. So you really want to be able to actually do that. But there's no Slayer Master in Varlamore, so there's no way to get a task without leaving. I looked into the option of allowing yourself to leave the island in order to get the task, but then only allowing tasks on the island to be done. But there's just way too many Slayer creatures that do not exist on Varlamore that you can get that would just soft lock you out. So that's not really an option. So the most pure way to train Slayer on an account like this would be lamping all the way to 48, which I have read through the Discord for the Varlamore locked accounts, and they have calculated that that can take over a year just on its own, not including also lamping room crafting and also lamping hunter. So some people, if you want to do that, that's fine. I do not. That does not sound fun to me. So I'm going to make other exceptions. Another exception would be I know there's a way to train Slayer that level 3 skiller pures use in a way that doesn't raise your combat. You can do it through some kind of weird boosting method with Wilderness Slayer. I don't exactly know how it works, but that's an option. So you could just train your Slayer through that up to 48, and then that doesn't raise your combat level. So you just do that before you start. Um, I might look into that, but another way to do this is to just wait till you get pretty high combat level on the island, and then just say, you know what, I'm just going to train Slayer off of the island. I'm not going to pick up drops, but it has to be done in order to get to the content that everyone's excited for. I almost forgot to mention that 48 Slayer is not going to be the only Slayer requirement on Varlamore. In Part 3, The Final Dawn, they plan to release these new Slayer creatures, these Stalkers, Custodia Stalkers, and there's going to be 3 variants, each requiring levels 54, 67, and 76 to kill. So if you're planning on lamping Slayer, you might have to lamp it all the way to 76 once Part 3 comes out. So after going through all of the problem skills and looking at the possible exceptions that can be made to make these skills trainable, I've grouped them into 3, possible tiers of exceptions. If you want to play this account to the extreme, you allow yourself to do Room Mysteries, Druidic Ritual, and buy a player own house, and that's it. You've got to lamp all of these requirements, which could take over a year and is extremely tedious, but that's the purest way to make a Varlamore locked account. The hard way is to allow yourself those 2 quests plus Eagle's Peak at 27 Hunter, buy a house, allow yourself a forestry kit, and allow yourself to train Slayer off of the island. Then you can train your hunter and construction through forestry, and you only need to lamp room crafting. All of that is still really tedious, but not nearly as long of a grind as in the extreme tier. And finally, for the casual, you allow yourself Room Mysteries, Druidic Ritual, Eagle's Peak once you use the 27 Hunter, the Museum Quiz to get you to 9 Hunter right off the bat. You allow yourself a player owned house, a bird snare, and a saw, and training up to all these skills before you set foot on Varlamore. So that way, once you get there, you don't really have to leave again, and you don't have to do any of the tedious grinds. You don't need to lamp. This is just if you want to play this for fun, and I think that's the way I'm leaning. I want this to be sort of a fun, light grind, and not a tedious account that gets me some kind of pure trophy status or anything like that. Now, with all that being said, you can't forget that there's still Part 3, The Rising Darkness, yet to be released, and there's all this stuff. So this, I think, is the original map as drawn by, what is his name? Gentle Tracker? Yeah, Gentle Tractor. I think that's the guy who originally came up with Varlamore and drew this map. So everything you see here grayed out is speculative. We don't know for sure that this is what it's going to look like. But this is where that fletching activity is going to be. Custodia Pass, that's where that new Slayer dungeon is going to be. This whole new city. I see a shortcut here. Maybe we can create agility at level 1 here. Who knows? But all this stuff is still unknown. And so there are a few things that, if released in this area, could change the exceptions that are required for the account. I'm calling this my wish list for the Final Dawn. Number 1 would be a spot to catch Crimson Swifts and access to a bird snare. Maybe a bird snare spawn, so right here, if there were Crimson Swift right here and a bird snare spawn like on the Isle of Souls, then you could train Hunter at level 1 right away, no exceptions needed. Another thing on the wish list is a saw spawn or a store that sells bagged plants. Maybe a farming store here in Auburnvale. Maybe right here you can buy something. That way you can train construction right from level 1 without needing that saw, without having to do forestry. And then you get 10 construction. You're able to do the Perilous Moon quest, and you get a saw during that quest. So that would eliminate any exception to allow construction to start. Another one is a way to train runecrafting before level 20. Probably not going to happen, but you can always hope. And in the end, I guess lamping it is an option. And the final thing on the wish list is a Slayer Master that goes along with the new Slayer dungeon. And that Slayer Master ideally would only assign tasks that are doable in that dungeon or on Varlamore as a whole. And that would allow you to train Slayer without leaving Varlamore at all. Probably not going to happen. I mean, I don't see a Slayer Master icon up here. This is still, again, not definitive, and Jagex hasn't said that they're going to release another Slayer Master. But if it does happen, that would be fantastic for Varlamore locked accounts. So there you have it. That's really all I wanted to get out there. I just wanted to go through all the research I had done so that anyone else who's interested in the Varlamore locked account can get a good overview of the difficulties of doing something like that. But all right, you will see me again in, I think it is June or July, when part 3 comes out and I make the account. Until then, peace.